Welcome back to Cinema Flicks and Music Picks. I'm Davey, your host with the most, the beast with the least. Least we can do today is a nice Sunday edition of It's a Wonderful Month with Jimmy Stewart. Let's address the elephant in the room first of all though. Hello. That's that done. Did he have a haircut? No, I didn't. I gave myself a haircut. Didn't cost any money at all. Garden shears, £20 saves. And it came out rather well. I've still got the old bob that I can do, the angry bob. Anyways, let's continue on with Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. See him here and sirens all the time. You must think I live in, America. It's just one for you American folk there. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington in this lovely digibook from Columbia, from Sony I should say, I suppose these days. This is Frank Capra's 1939 masterpiece about a young idealistic senator, Jefferson Smith. There's Jimmy and Frank on set, who is selected to be a bit of a yes man. He's a folksy, likeable type who will take instruction and will do what he's told and vote the way he's told. They can convince him easily that it's in the best interest of the state, so he'll be the junior senator underneath Claude Rains. And I can see right through Claude Rains, Invisible Man joke there, because he was whatever. Claude Rains is he's in the payola for he's in the graft for big business. There's a dam being built and whatnot, and he's the fella that's kind of behind that going through. So the young idealistic Mr. Smith looks up to Claude Rains. Well, looks down on him. Claude Rains was short and Jimmy Stewart was very tall, but he looks up to Claude Rains metaphorically, because Claude Rains was an idealistic young lawyer before he was a senator who worked with Jimmy Stewart's father. So there's your setup, and wouldn't you know it, Mr. Smith isn't quite the idiot that they think he is. He might be idealistic, but he's not quite a fool. He might not know the ins and outs of the Senate and how things go. Here's Jimmy and Claude there, but he's prepared to stay up all night and do his homework. And it only takes a night to do these things. The idea of the film is something that Frank Capra would return to throughout his work with Jimmy Stewart, and with others, Gary Cooper, that one person with good intentions can make the difference to a much larger group, and that larger bodies often, even if they start from a decent place with decent intentions, will be corruptible. So there's a part at the start where Mr. Smith is given a seat and told that this is where so and so used to sit. Some great American senator of the past, I can't remember which one, and he's awful impressed. But the real notion is that these are just seats. It's the people that fill them that make the institution work. So you shouldn't be too impressed by the buildings. You shouldn't be too impressed by the seats, the desks. It's the intentions of the people that stand up and be counted that are what you're supposed to admire. So Jefferson Smith kind of falls for that at the start. He falls for the whole, all the statues and all the plaques and all. He goes on the sightseeing tours and whatnot. But he quickly learns that he's going to have to shape up, because he soon finds out just how much of a patsy he is via the wonderful Jean Arthur. Jean Arthur was perhaps the queen of the screwball comedy, and Frank Capra's best leading lady. We're going to be looking at her tomorrow spoiler, and You Can't Take It With You. She is top billed in this, although it's now thought of as a Jimmy Stewart movie. Even still to this day, Jean Arthur's name's first. And on You Can't Take It With You, Jean Arthur's name's first. In fact, on that, Lionel Barrymore's name's before Jimmy Stewart. So, this was really the film that made Jimmy Stewart Jimmy Stewart. It was the second biggest grossing film of 1939. It beat Gone with the Wind. Beaten only by Gone with the Wind. It beat The Wizard of Oz. Not bad going. 11 Oscar nominations, only won Best Writing, but Frank Capra had already won 3 Oscars in 5 years, so I think he'd probably... Claude Rains and Harry Carey Sr. were both Oscar nominated for their performances as supporting actor. Harry Carey. I'm going to commit Harry Carey if I stumble over my words once more. Harry Carey Sr. Is barely in it and barely talks, but somehow he got an Oscar nomination. I think just because he'd been around that bloody long by that point. He had been a star of silent films, John Ford's early westerns, for example, but he gets an Oscar nomination. And not that it's not deserved, because he's fine, but it's a bit like Judi Dench in Shakespeare in Love. You think, she was in it for 2 minutes, what's the bloody point in that? Whereas Claude Rains is phenomenal in this. He's absolutely breathtaking. As much as Jimmy Stewart is the star of this film, and you can see why it made him an absolute superstar, it's Claude Rains who is the building blocks on which the whole thing stands. Because he's got the most difficult job for me, where you have to believe that he is conflicted, that there used to be a good man in there, that there's still the possibility that he could be a good man. There's also the possibility he's still just a bad one. There's still the possibility it could go either way. There's still the possibility that he is just going to take Jefferson Smith for a ride, or that he's going to back him. You really have a tough time seeing what's behind Claude Rains' eyes, and that's testament to just how wonderful he performs in this film. It's a very modern performance. It doesn't feel like a stagey performance, which a lot of 1930s actors still had because they'd come up through vaudeville and whatnot. Claude Rains was just phenomenal, and he looks much older in this. They've made him up to be much older than he actually was. I mean, this is before The Invisible Man, but and Casablanca, of course, where he's he gets the famous he's Louis, isn't he? Yeah, Sergeant. Round up the usual suspects. I mean, look at him in the eyes, me old man. But no, he still had The Invisible Man to come. He still had Casablanca to come, and he's young and dark haired in those. Not that you see his hair very much in The Invisible Man. So, and again, there's a better picture of Claude. It's amazing what a wig can do for you. I should have thought of that. And he was obviously Phantom of the Opera and The Adventures of Robin Hood. He was Prince John with the Errol Flynn movie and whatnot. One interesting thing about this, it started out as a sequel, hence the Mr. part, for Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, Frank Capra's previous hit that did win more Oscars. And Gary Cooper was just unavailable. So Mr. Deeds was going to go, he's very like Jefferson Smith. He's folksy, but, idealistic. He wants to make a difference to the community. But he was unavailable, so it was rewritten to be a vehicle for the up-and-coming Jimmy Stewart and push him as a real leading man for Columbia for the first time. He'd been a leading man before, but mostly in slightly second-tier movies, not quite starring vehicles yet. The real A pictures that the company were really backing. But this would certainly be the one that cemented that. It's often said that Jimmy Stewart should have had the Oscar for this instead of the following year for the Philadelphia Story, and that's why he got it the next year. I don't know. I don't really take much interest in these award things, but I can kind of see the point there. I mean, he's the lead here. He's not the lead in the Philadelphia Story. That's Cary Grant. But yeah, it doesn't really matter, does it? They all get awards. Your legacy is not on your mantelpiece. So, I mean, it's an ode to the idea of idealism itself, to the notion of democracy. It's a very January the 6th kind of movie. If you want to bring it up to date, there's some lines in this that you could pluck straight out of the headlines from the last 10 years, and it just shows you that, I've said this in numerous videos, I hate that phrase when people go, oh, it's more relevant now than it was when it came out. No, it isn't. That's the point. It's always relevant. That's the problem. Things don't change. The players change, the game stays the same. So there are parts in this, though, that incredible left wing, which I'm not sure Jimmy would have done later on, or if he did. I'm not sure he picked up on some of the notions on them, but it was condemned by quite a lot of Republicans. It was banned by the Nazis. In Russia, it became quite a hit. And there was also, quite a bit of Russian stuff in the film we're looking at tomorrow with Jimmy and Jean. It's got one of the great scenes ever is the filibuster in this, where, here's Jefferson looking out, towards the Senate and the Capitol building, and you just think, when you're watching this scene of the filibuster, where Jefferson Smith realizes he has to just stay on his feet and talk and talk and talk, and he can't yield, and he can't sit down, and he can't drink. It's one of the greatest acting performances you can possibly imagine. It's physical, it's emotional, it'll break your heart. The corrupt machine tries to tear down Jimmy Stewart, led by Ed Arnold's character, who's the Jim, the big cheese of the complex, the media complex and the damn complex that Claude Rains is surreptitiously working for. So there's a real notion that Jefferson Smith, here's a shot, I'm looking for a shot of the actual filibuster, there's a shot down there, when he's doing his filibuster, that Jimmy Stewart, this is him really, really punching for the knockout blow here. This is him saying, I'm in Hollywood and I'm Jimmy bloody Stewart. This is where he's born, really. You can go just one film a cap earlier to You Can't Take It With You, and you can see glimpses, but this is where Jimmy Stewart is born. This is the movie that makes Jimmy Stewart, and overnight kind of kills Gary Cooper, because he was the folksy hero from the 30s. Gary Cooper still had hits, still had Sergeant York, still had High Noon, obviously, but it wasn't the young idealistic type anymore. And this was just a phenomenon, of a movie, as I've said, with box office and reception and whatnot. Controversial. When they submitted the script to the Hays Code censors, it was sent back to them, and they were told it was disrespectful to the Senate, and it would undermine confidence internationally in American affairs because it makes them all look corrupt. And Frank Capra saying, well, they are bloody corrupt. That's the whole point. That it's if you feel corrupt when you watch this, if you think that you're more Claude Rains than you are Jefferson Smith, then maybe that's the bloody problem. So you could almost say it was made for the senators and congressmen and president themselves. It was made, with that in mind, that he's sending a message to the country about who represents them, but also to the representatives that they're being watched. It's no longer a case of just tick a box and you'll never hear about them again. We're in a new age now. Radio's coming, TV's just about, and it wouldn't quite take off for another few years with the war and things, but TV has been invented, obviously. Film reels are definitely in, talkies have been about for years, so you can hear politicians, you can see them much clearer than you ever have before. So the distance between you and the politician that you've only ever seen on a ballot paper is evaporated by this point. And everybody wanted to believe that their guy was Mr. Smith. They're voting for Mr. Smith because he's not from a state. He's not from Ohio. Shout out to Ryan Gavalier from Ohio. He's not from Missouri. He's not, he's just from an unnamed state. So it could be your state. Going by his accent, it's probably not, Texas, Oklahoma, Alabama. But, he could be your representative. And he's got this wonderful effect. Jefferson Smith have been able to turn people where everybody underestimates him until they spend 2 minutes with him and they just fall for him, because they think the idealism must be some kind of either a sham, a cover, or he really is just that naive and stupid. Whereas no, he will convince you that no, we can do better and we should do better, because other people have done better in America and around the world. And who are we if we don't try and do better? And it's very fascinating to see that kind of thing, that kind of message being made in 1939, with Europe on the brink of war and America 2 years away from entering the conflict. Because Frank Capra, of course, was an immigrant and had already at this point known people that had succumbed to the march of fascism. But and Jimmy Stewart, of course, served, and Jean Arthur did a lot of work with the USO, is that what it's called? The kind of entertaining the troops and things. Claude Rains did his bit with the propaganda and things. I don't believe he was allowed to serve. I think he had a medical issue, but he did propaganda films of all sorts and things. So, everybody involved did their part. Frank Capra, of course, did war movies for the government, which was detailed in a documentary along with John Ford's war movies. I can't remember the name of it. Five Came Back, something like that. Look it up. Frank Capra, John Ford, war documentary. There you go. Just Google that. Or use whatever search engine. Bing, I don't know, is that still a thing? This has been more of a rambling one, because I feel like if you've been watching Jimmy Stewart Month, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, So it's really just my take on Mr. Smith, really. There's not much I can kind of add to the consensus or bring you to it, and that's kind of the problem with doing these big hitters. That's why I kind of avoided doing the likes of Vertigo and whatnot until the end, because I just feel that, it's been done, to quote George Harrison in The Simpsons, but it's my spin on it, so what, I can't do a Jimmy Stewart Month without hitting these kind of classics. So it's just a wonderful film. It's just a sensational film. There was to be a sequel in 1949, Mr. Smith Causes a Riot. Never obviously materialised. It was remade as a sitcom in the 60s. Names were changed for some reason, and the circumstances were changed. And Eddie Murphy did a loose remake in the 90s where he's, it's basically trading places, but Eddie Murphy goes to the Senate instead of Dan Aykroyd's house. Not as good either. I like Trading Places. And Billy Jack. Remember the Billy Jack movies? The cool biker movie it started with. Billy Jack number 4 or 5 is Billy Jack Goes to Washington, which is an almost verbatim remake of this. And it's produced by Frank Capra Jr. It's so weird. It starts out as a Baker franchise and ends up with a remake of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Bloody hell. As my phone goes, I better check it and see if it's anything too important. It says that I wouldn't give you 2 cents for all your fancy rules if behind them they didn't have a little bit of plain, ordinary, everyday kindness and a little looking out for the other fella too. Signed, Jefferson Smith. Sounds like he knows what he's talking about, doesn't it? But yeah, that's kind of my 20-minute theories on Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. It's just a fantastic classic film that I refuse to believe, if you really have been following Jimmy Stewart Month, that you won't have seen. So yeah, if you haven't though, if you really haven't, then please do, because it's just sensational. It's Jimmy Stewart's coming out party. It's Jean Arthur's one of her most charming performances. Frank Capra's touch is heavy-handed when it needs to be and light when it needs to be. It's got that kind of Ernst Lubitsch thing. Harry Carey's in it. He smiles a few times. And again, the underrated hero of this film is Claude Rains. He's sensational. And note to others, if you cannot do an American accent, do what Claude Rains does here. Don't even try. He just does his English accent. He's supposed to be from the same state as Jefferson Smith, but Claude Rains has the most English accent you've ever heard in your life, and Jimmy Stewart talks like Jimmy Stewart. Does anybody care after the first 10 minutes of the movie once you've fallen in love with the character? No. There you go. So, Claude Rains month coming soon. That might be fun. Maybe for Halloween. Just keep doing these underappreciated movies. But it's out in 4K as well. It was one of the first 4Ks that Sony did in their nice big Columbia Classics boxes. I think it was in volume 1. I've not picked up any of those yet because they're so desperate, you know. It's like, yeah, here's Taxi Driver and Mr. Smith Goes to War. It's like, what? It's a bit of a strange combination. But anyway, I did promise a double bill today. It's actually not going to be, because tomorrow, when I watch the three Capras again, my initial thought was that today I would do You Can't Take It With You and Mr. Smith, and do it as a Jimmy Stewart, Jean Arthur double bill. But when I rewatched all three, I decided that tomorrow will be the double bill, because I want to talk more about Lionel Barrymore, because he's so good and You Can't Take It With You. He's so good, and he's so evil, and It's a Wonderful Life. Anyway, till tomorrow, my friends. Stay very safe out there, huh? And do me a favour. Don't get stoned and give yourself a haircut. Unless you're as good as me. Love and mercy, my dears. Love, and as they say in France, merci.